Welcome to Tanchaz Talk, the world's only English language program focusing primarily on Hungarian folk music. I am Kalman Magyar Öcsi, speaking from Toronto, Canada. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's a new look today because I'm doing this episode from home. Episodes of Tanchaz Talk, which combine a mix of music and stories delivered by yours truly, are available as always on tanchaz.com, that's tanchaz.com, or on YouTube. Just search Tanchaz Talk and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Today, we have an episode of Tanchaz Talk Interviews. This is where I usually delve into long-form interviews with a wide array of guests. Episodes of Tanchaz Talk Interviews are available on all popular podcast platforms, including Apple, Google, and Spotify podcast stores. So make sure you subscribe and leave a nice review if you like what you hear. Today, I'm changing up the format a bit and delivering a best of episode. I'll be playing some of my favorite moments from some of the 20 Tanchaz Talk Interviews episodes that have been released thus far, as well as some music that's never been played before, which is unique because the Tanchaz Talk Interviews episodes are generally conversational in nature without music. Now, what's the special occasion, you ask? Well, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to the Tanchaz movement. Happy birthday to you. A little twist there at the end. Yes, it's the 50th birthday of the Tanchaz movement. The first Tanchaz was on May 6, 1972 at the Book Club at Liszt Ferenc Square in downtown Budapest. Now, the first musicians were Béla Halmos, Ferenc Sebő, and Péter Éri, who was still playing with Muzsikás to this very day. And I was looking at this book. This book is a newly released book, Tanchaz 50. And it's in my hands here, if you're watching on the YouTube, by Béla Szilárd Jaworski. It's a compilation of really nice articles. And I was reading, it's in Hungarian. I was reading about the very first Tanchaz in May of 1972, as like there's really some great stories, including how Halmos Béla's violin was stepped on unintentionally by one of the dancers there as he was running down the staircase. So they had to get a substitute violin. So the actual Tanchaz started with taped or record music, pre-recorded music, but then the band came to the rescue, and the rest is, of course, history. And you'll also read about how at the first Tanchaz, as the guests entered the club, they were all offered a shot of pálinka and a greeting of peace, békesség, which was drawn from the tradition of the Transylvanian city of Szék, which makes sense given that the origins of the very name Tanchaz come from Szék, as we've covered in past episodes. So here we are, 50 years later, and if you want to join me for a quick shot of pálinka, I won't be mad if you press pause and you fill yourself up. I have pre-filled my pálinka in my Vilmos Körte, the shot glass here, and like they did 50 years ago, I raise my pálinka glass to you, and I greet you with peace, love, and prosperity, and thank you for being a part of Tanchaz Talk and the program, and let's enjoy some of the best moments from the program thus far, and some fabulous music. And here's to you. I'm just going to take a sip because this is actually Vajdaság pálinka, and it's very strong. Woo! So I will sip it. First up is Steve Kotansky, who I interviewed in August 2020. He's been a prolific folk dance teacher, performer, and researcher for 5 decades, and has probably taught more Hungarian dancing to non-Hungarians in the United States than anyone else. In this clip, he talks about the origins of the Tanchaz movement and the insights that he learned from Csaba Pálfi, one of the Hungarian folk dance movement's earlier pioneers. Here's Steve Kotansky.
There's sort of that. There's that thing, Öcsi, I think, too. If why did and Csaba Pálfi, back to Csaba, he talked about this. What what was the main reason why the Tanchaz movement was able to take place in Budapest? And you know what his take on it? He's a scientist. He was a scientist besides an artist and a dancer. He said the most important thing to have, first of all, was expendable time, free time. Because without free time, people would have no interest or money or anything to go, and they had to get away from it, far enough away from it. I mean, people had stopped folk dancing more or less, except maybe Czardas for decades before the Tanchaz came into being. There's this sort of saying that why should we dance anymore? We have these professionals on the stage who come twice a year and they do it on television, But I think that people needed free time. I think they also needed to get out of the house to meet other people. And you had some brilliant minds like Timar and Martin and Pessovar and even Novak and all these people who had different takes on it. Susie's did a lot of interviews with Novak and Timar about why the Tanchaz, and she'll talk to you about that. I think it's fascinating. But it's the right time, right place, right political environment, and this whole nomad, I don't know, the nomad generation, that there was just a resurgence, and it's cyclical. It's happened again, and it's interesting how it went. It happened in Hungary, and in all these Eastern European countries that still had a little finger link to their folklore and their dance and their music, how they went about interpreting it and reinvigorating it. The Greeks are fascinating. I mean, we could talk for days about this stuff, and I don't know that we would get any close to the right answer if there is one. But I think in Budapest, when Pahovlich told me that, I said, for young people to all of a sudden get interested or find an interest in this, it took leadership. And it took, as they said, some free time and some, and look where it's going now. I mean, I don't want to get involved with the political aspects, but it was made clear to me at the Tanchaz Talk when I saw what kind of pamphlets were out there that this can also serve a purpose and I don't know that the purpose is necessarily the right purpose, but it can also serve a purpose for other ends. You know what I'm talking about.
That was Steve Kotansky. Now, in my interview with the great Kalman Dreisziger, folk dance expert, author, and organizer, and now a retired creative director in the advertising industries of Toronto and Montreal, he spoke about his own personal experience attending the renowned Kossuth Klub Tanchaz in Budapest in the late 1970s. And Kalman's, he talked also about his early attempts to incorporate what he saw and the spirit of the Tanchaz in his own choreographies after he returned back home to Toronto. Kalman Dreisziger.
I was in Hungary sometime in the mid to late 70s, and somebody told me a friend of the family told me to go to the Kossuth Klub because there was a Tanchaz at the Kossuth Klub, and I didn't know what a Tanchaz was, but I went to the Kossuth Klub, and it was absolutely, my jaw dropped. It was absolutely amazing. For one thing, Jura did a solo playing to Halmos Béla's music, in front of Halmos Béla's music playing, and it was just jaw-dropping.
You just gave me chills, Kalman. Thank you.
So at that point I said to myself, and then there were dances from Sake being done, I said to myself, I gotta learn. I just have to learn that stuff. Who am I gonna learn it from? And I talked to a couple of the dancers from the older generation who I knew in the Alami, and they said, oh yeah, we can teach you stuff. We have a choreography that's called Seiki Tanso. But and I said, no, I don't want to learn the choreography. I want to learn the dances. And they said, oh well, talk to that kid, and they pointed to Jura. And so that's how it started, and But to get back to your question, when I came back, I was hell-bent on trying that in that direction. But I knew that Kodály had, not everybody had that cathartic experience that I had in Hungary. So how am I going to bring them across? Now, what had happened, on the other hand, is that there was an amazing musical phenomenon in Toronto called the Fekete-Föld, Bertsch brothers, who were sort of in the same mode as the Tanchaz movement, in and of their own volition. So not as influenced by the Tanchaz movement. They wanted to do it on their own. So I went to RP, Bertsch RP, and said, you want to do something of this nature? And so we started a Fekete-Föld ensemble, dancers partly from Kodály, partly from St. Catherine's kids, and we actually had a show as well at some point, doing, I think in the show was a Seiki choreography, but Tanchaz style choreography. Coincidentally, in brackets, somebody in the audience told me afterwards that stuff must be fun to do. It's really boring to watch. Yes. Yes. So, and then once that happened, that gave an impetus to me trying it with Kodály as well. But it was a slow, gradual thing.
That's Kalman Dreisziger talking about the first Tanchaz he went to, and then how he tried to incorporate the spirit of that, and eventually did very successfully with the Kodály ensemble in Toronto. Now, speaking of Fekete-Föld and the Bertsch brothers, I want to play my first clip here, some music from a Kis Tenyere, which is Palóc. As I told you, I'm playing all new music, i.e. bootlegs mostly today. This is, I think it's Duvö playing for a dance group in Hungary, some music from Kis Tenyere in Palóc. Palóc! Hop, hop, hop. Palóc, of course, from northern Hungary, northern Hungarian region. Always some wonderful, wonderful music from up there. Kiterítve a fűre, Szalma János mellette. Vasat üt a kezedre, hopp, az egyetre, hopp. The dog is from me. Sorry, I'm doing this from home, so the dog sometimes does have something to say. Hope that wasn't too disturbing. It brought a nice village vibe to it. So that was music from Polóc. Now, last year I spoke with Péter Levai, a professor and department head at the Hungarian Dance Academy's Master of Arts Folk Dance Education Program, a highly experienced and widely published researcher and instructor, and a former legendary folk dancer with, among other groups, the Hungarian State Folk Ensemble. As always with Péter, it was a very philosophical and at times theoretical discussion, and one of the moments of the conversation that stuck out to me was when I asked him about the early 1980s and his experience being a dancer with the Hungarian State Folk Ensemble at a time when they were still performing the old school stylized Miklos Rábai type of choreographies, but also beginning to incorporate the Tanchaz inspired village folk dances through Sándor Tímár and other choreographers' work. Here's Péter Levai talking about living through that moment as a professional dancer on stage.
When I was a member of the Ballet Institute, we just learned these different kind of different style of dances also. So not just Tímár Sándor style folk dances. So I think the stage is different. When you are on the stage and you have to tell a fairy tale or something like that from the stage, it's a different imagination to the audience. And I wasn't any problem with the Rábai choreographies because I was very meseszerű. I don't know what.
Oh, yes, like a fantasy almost. Like it was very storytelling type of approach.
It would like to tell something.
Right.
And when we do just the Tímár style dances, that maybe we can call the original or traditional folk dances, we don't want to talk anything about just the dance. How high qualified can we dance the traditional dance? Mm-hmm. That was the main character when we do that style. And of course we were a professional dancer. That was our job to do that. So that was a difference between these two styles. How can we imagination and how can we put on the stage?
Do you think the stage gets in the way of truly experiencing traditional folk dance, which is best appreciated, not even in the context of a tanchaz, but going back to the wedding, in the context of its function, which is a party or a celebration? Like how do you utilize the stage as a choreographer or as a professional dancer to really convey the essence of it? I think it's a great challenge.
Yeah, I think if you go on a stage, you have to be very clear about your body. What can you do and what you cannot to do? This is the first. The second is you have enough imagination of that style, what you would like to show on the stage. If you have more information, more deeper information, what you would like to do, you can do it on the stage, and you have to
convince
the audience you are the master of this, and you have to show them, and they have to believe you are the master of this. Mm-hmm. So that was my opinion. These two styles of dances, and I would like to be a master. Always, I would like to be a master, not just a dancer. That was my lifestyle, to do a master.
Right.
Best of me.
Right. So back then, you guys were already going to tanchazes and stuff, right? So I would say the younger, but then you have these, older, now for us it's funny, but 30 plus veteran, 30-year-old plus veterans who who entered the group in the 60s before the Tanchaz was even invented or discovered, so to speak, the Tanchaz movement started. Were you like, when there were like parties within the group, was there like a clear difference between the older people who kind of sat there saying, I don't know how to improvise a seiki or improvise a mezőségi. In fact, I've never heard of mezőségi really in that sense, you know, versus you guys who are out there improvising with the live band and etc. Was there some of that going on? I'm just very curious because, you know, you were there on the ground then.
I think I have another impression. I was in 1918 when I was first time in Transylvania for 2 weeks long tournament with my friends, with Koko, Besenyő Gabi, and Lelovics Rita and Gyöngyvér, with Hortobágyi Gyöngyvér. So we were students, but we just went to Transylvania just like a tourists.
Yes.
And that two weeks long tournament, we went to Gyimes and Kalotaszeg and Mezőség and Szék. We were 3 wedding party in Szék between this 2 week long tournament. Okay. So that was completely a big shock of us. How can we understand the folk dance, the really folk dance, from the folk people imaginations or
point of view, their point of view.
Yeah, the difference is we are not a dancer, we are a cultural heritage transporter.
Yes.
And this is completely change our mind, our minds, because we are not just a dancer. We have to save something from these people to that people who are just the audience. We're just sitting in a theater because we have to show that people also, not just ourselves. And that was the moment when we understand we have a bigger job, not just to be a dancer.
When you discovered this, and your colleagues as well, including colleagues who were in the state ensemble at the time with you, when it came time to, you know, Ecseri Lakodalmas or, you know, Pantlikáz, whatever those type of old dances, were you like, oh God, no, this is not what it's about, man? Like, were you almost, you know, disengaged from that old style, and all you wanted to do is let's do all the new Timar kind of stuff? Even by the way, the new Timar stuff I know is really old Timar stuff now. That's developed as well. But were you like, no, I don't want to do that old stuff anymore?
No, not from me.
Okay.
Not from me. I love to dance. I love to do that dances also because you are an impressor. You're expressionist of the movement.
Yes.
And this little story is just like Ecseri Lakodalmas or Este a Fonóba or whatever. These stories, these tales, let us to play on the stage. That was very different when we just make hardly the traditional folk dance. So we just make waves. How can we do the traditional folk dances with very strong energy, and how can we play this little fairy tales on the stage? That was because we were a professional dancer. That was our profession. How can we do that? How can we do 2, 3, 4 different parts of előadó?
Yeah, performance. Yeah, performance.
Performer. So how can we do a really good performer, not just a dancer?
Yes.
So this is why we don't angry when old style choreographies were on the stage. So that wasn't a problem for us.
Péter Levai, always with some amazing insight when I interviewed him last year. Let's do some more music, huh? Let's hear some Palatka mezőség. This is Gyonta, our band Gyonta from from eastern Canada, from the provinces of Ontario and Quebec, with Jim Cockle from Edmonton, and József Szász Jóci playing the second bracha, or the first bracha, I guess, back in, I think 2013, at the Western Canadian Hungarian Folk Festival for one of the groups there. Important relationship between the two contra, or the two violas, one of them playing the downbeat, 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 and the other one offbeat, offbeat, ding, ding. Listen to that nice friction there. Sometimes the bass player gets carried away after all that. By the way, I finished my Tanchaz 50 palinko. Did you? And the crowd goes mad. There you have it. Jonta playing Magyar Palatka from Transylvania. I loved my discussion in 2020 with my dear friend Lili Fundak-Kaszai, one of Hungary's most creative, enterprising, and highly acclaimed Hungarian folk dancers and singers. She co-directs the prolific Angyalföldi Vadrózsa ensemble, is a former winner of the Fölszállott a Páva nationally televised folk competition, and, of course, is a brilliant singer who has performed widely with the world music sensation Besodrom and the internationally known Zagyva folk band. In one part of our interview, she gave some terrific advice on how to bring village dances to the stage in an exciting and, I would say, enticing manner through choreographies. Here's the tip that Lili Fundak-Kaszai shared.
Before we make a choreography, we always try to read something special about that town or village. So maybe a legend, maybe a folk tale, maybe a folk song, something which is just make a click and our brain just can, I got an idea. So we always collect things and we just have to collect the way what we would like to do.
Give me can you give me a recent example of this? I'm curious. This is very interesting to me. What, a recent example of a Raboközi or Somogyi or something, or that your Füzesi or whatever it is, where this happened.
Like Hajdúsági.
Okay.
We make the Hajdúsági for Cirkalom. They also joined the Páva, Cirkalom from Vajdaság, Bácska, Topolya.
Okay, it's another dance group. Okay, yeah.
And it name was How is the Hajdúsági Wing Malom, nem tudom. Windmill goes.
Okay.
Így forog a hajdúsági szélmalom.
Okay, this is the way the windmill of Hajdúság spins.
And we make a stick dance when the boys just dancing with their sticks like the windmill.
Yes.
So
right.
That was the opening situation.
Gotcha. Opening scene, yeah.
Because it's not an average thing, and after that you can dance like Szatmári, like everything, but you should do a not average moment in your choreography.
Yes.
So this is one example.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Yeah. What I really like about Lili's advice in that interview is that it harkens back to the type of storytelling, the storytelling stylized choreographies that Péter Levai spoke about doing with the Hungarian State Folk Ensemble. So Lili offers kind of a type of solution to make the village dances more palatable on stage through this kind of storytelling device. Now, her advice is similar to what Walt Mahovlich shared with me when it comes to putting folk music on the stage. Walt Mahovlich, you'll recall, is a key figure in North America for the preservation and performance of music from the Carpathian Basin and South Slavic nations, and he's the band leader of Harmonia in Cleveland. In this clip, Walt talks about... Wait a second, not yet, Walt. In this clip, Walt talks about how to construct a folk music show and successfully connect with North American audiences when performing folk music. Now I can press play.
I decided to kind of take the show on the road, which was about 78, or not 78, sorry, maybe around 98. Some of the advice that I got from people who were playing in other bands, I got friends who play with the Klezmatics, for example, which is, a klezmer band that's been around actually longer than Harmonia, interestingly, and has done very well. But, they said, you always need to have in mind, what's coming next. And I also got some advice for people who were talking about, frankly, about marketing that helped me. And again, because the way that I do things, if I'm playing a concert for, let's say, Hungarians or Slovaks or Romanians, I don't really do that. Things do flow because we figured out what we're going to play, but I don't feel the necessity of really telling a story. But if I'm playing for a multi-ethnic or quote-unquote American group, it's really necessary, I think, to put the music in context.
Yeah.
And to make the show be all of a piece, for one thing to flow into the other, and also to give some cultural understanding of what's going on. We might do, say, a set of wedding songs from Eastern Slovakia where Beata grew up, and she can, both she and I can talk about that, about that experience, because otherwise just playing the tune, I mean, they're beautiful, but if you don't have an idea of what it's about emotionally, it's going to be harder to connect with it.
Right.
And one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking about is what the experience of this music was for people like my grandparents and parents and me, who are here in the United States. Because, I did not learn to play this music in Budapest, growing up in Budapest, or for that matter, growing up in a village in Transylvania, or heck, in Zsumbarak in Croatia, where my dad's family is from. But I feel that experience is very valid and important, and also, it's popular as well. And I had somebody make a comment to me once, which was something that I really thought about. We went to see the really wonderful group Taraf de Haiduks from Cluj in Romania.
Yeah.
And who are wonderful musicians. And they're kind of a floating group, they're sort of all related through family connections, and you're not quite sure whoever's going to show up, but they'll all be very good. But the comment I got was, we love seeing Harmonia actually more than these guys because they're hills and valleys in music. You guys don't just decide everything's got to be really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you've heard that the audiences like fast music. And I try to make sure that there's a certain amount of flow and drama, and it's stuff that I kind of obsess over.
Right.
And also we are at the stage where if we need to make a change on the fly, and because people do pay attention, we can change the program while we're up there. And, they're kind of the signals that I'm able to give to the other guys, which generally they catch.
Right, generally.
Generally,
yeah.
and we're pretty good about that in that way.
Walt Mahovlich, always with some fantastic advice. Let's hear some more music. This is music from Nagyo, Gáspár Béla and his band. What I really like about this approach here by Gáspár Béla of Nagyo, he's very virtuosic, obviously, but he also gives great respect to silence when he's resting, and he lets the band just chug away behind him. The importance of silence. Speaking of Nagyo, I also interviewed Levente Szekely, one of the experts of the music from Nagyo, from this village in Transylvania. Levente has ascended to the highest levels of his craft, both as a Hungarian diplomat, holding the rank of ambassador, and a musician, as a violinist for the Hungarian State Folk Ensemble. originally from Transylvania. Levente was studying classical violin at the Music Conservatory in Kolozsvár, in Cluj, as they call it in Romanian, but in Kolozsvár, Romania or Transylvania, and fortuitously became the violinist for the very first Transylvanian Tanchazes in Kolozsvár, which began in 1977, so about 5 years after it started in Budapest. Now here's Levente Szekely's story about the first Tanchazes in Transylvania.
Well, everything is connected to our class in the music school, actually. Everything started from there. One of my fellow students was Árpád Köncei, and his father and mother were kind of politically opposition leaders for the Hungarian community there. So the story goes that Árpi's mother had a class of her own in the sole remaining Hungarian language school in Kolozsvár. At that time, they were disappearing under political pressure. So she decided to have with her class at the closing of the school year a dance, Széky dance, and obviously they wanted. And Árpi's father was an employee for a short while of the Folklore Institute in Kolozsvár, which was closed not after a short existence. I mean the Hungarian part of it. The Romanian part, of course, worked longer. Now, anyway, so Árpi's father said, we need live music. And the obvious thing is that their son has classmates who play violin and viola and bass, and so they should do it. And of course we signed up. Fun, interesting, young and pretty girls there. And so we were given notes, written notes about what we have to play. So we played it. And then Árpi's father said, well, guys, this was awful. This is shit. And we were so revolted, how could he say that? We are professional, we were good musicians. And so, okay, guys, listen, come to my place and then listen to the original.
Wow.
And that was the wow moment, in my life. We went there and we listened to original recordings. At that time, he was still an employee of the Folklore Institute there. So he had, I remember, from Maros Gombás and from Gyimes and from Mezőség, Kalotaszeg. It was really overwhelming. And that was a turning point in my life because I gave up my classical career and I definitely decided to learn this music. So, the Tanchaz. We were classmates.
Okay.
And we decided to go to Szék. And we went there to listen live, and then we fell even more in love with them, and the boys and girls there were very welcoming, very friendly. And so we started to learn this music, first from Lajta, and then it didn't work, and then we met Zoli bácsi, who has heard about us, invited to his place. He gave us generously a lot of his recordings. We started to play. And then comes the other moment there that our school, the music school, was just opposite to the park where every Thursday the young people from Szék met every Thursday, because the young girls who were servants at the Kolozsvár elite, they had their day off on Thursday, and the boys who worked usually, on construction sites. So they met there every Thursday evening, afternoon. And we just went out during class breaks. We went out to meet them, to talk to them, because we became friends. And then came the idea, well, if we play their music, and every Thursday they are there, and then we should actually play for them, because usually they danced in the park only at singing and whistling, futurotech.
Yeah.
So we decided that we should do that. And Arpi's father knew the director of the puppet theater in Kolozsvár. Mm-hmm. And the lady graciously gave us every Thursday evening the rehearsal room of the puppet theater. So we went there with the guys, the young people, the youth of Szék, and we played for them, and they had then dance house, the original dance house, just like in their village. But after 2 weeks, the word spread out in Kolozsvár, which was the biggest, has the biggest universities in Transylvania. A lot of students there. And some of the students already knew about the Tanchaz movement in Hungary. So they showed up at the door. The door was closed, of course, because we had to keep it quiet, not to upset the authorities.
Right.
But then when we had around 50 or 100 students shouting and knocking at the door, we had to open the doors and let them in.
Right.
So this is how the Tanchaz in Kolozsvár actually started at all.
That was Levente Szekely about the first Transylvanian Tanchazes in Kolozsvár in the late 70s. Now, getting Tanchazes off the ground in Western Canada wasn't easy either, as we learned in my discussion with Lajos, Lecso, Miklos, who has been one of the driving forces in Western Canada's Hungarian folk dance and music community since the 1980s. In this clip, Lecso and I spoke about the challenges in introducing Tanchazes at all during the annual Western Canadian Hungarian Folk Dance Festival, and they even reminded me in this clip about the first time we met, which I had actually forgotten about until the interview. By the way, sorry for the background noise at the beginning of this clip.
Yeah, we never had Tanchaz to tape music. Back then, of course, it was the cassette tapes, right?
Right.
We never did that. It was once there were bands and musicians coming, either they were just touring and they did a show at the Hungarian Hall or at the Western Canadian Festival, was at that point where some of us were saying there should be a Tanchaz. We shouldn't have the evening discos. That was the thing that happened at the Western Canadian Festival. The nighttime they would bring in a DJ with lights and everything, and they had a disco. Believe it or not.
Yeah, I remember. Even in the mid-'90s, there was in two halls, and there was one hall with the disco, the other hall with the Tanchaz. It was pretty ridiculous.
Yes, and the other big thing was there was a gala evening where we'd be in tuxedos and long gowns and $100 plate ball with handing out the plaques to all the dance groups, and that was the big fundraiser for the festival. So they really did not want to give up on having these events. And even the bands the first few bands that did come out, they weren't great Tanchaz bands. Right. So we couldn't build from that. But once Jim Cockle showed up on the scene, I remember, I can't remember which festival it would be, but there were times when Jim Cockle, Sue Beto from Edmonton, some people might know that name, the Kadas from Victoria, Iggy and Louise, and myself and my wife at the time, Andrea, we'd be saying, give us a space, just a little room space somewhere, and we do Tanchaz. Meanwhile, the disco or this big banquet's going on in another room. And I remember being thrown out of rooms by hotel security and stuff like that. You know, and it was a hard push to get Tanchaz happening.
Yeah.
And when eventually it started, I think, oh boy, the first really good Tanchaz would have been with you guys in Calgary, Lecso. So it would have been you. Can't remember if you were on contra or violin.
I was on contra there, and not Zagyva Natalia played violin, and Attila Pop played bass. That's 90, I think 97-ish.
That late.
Yeah.
So that was, we had dabbled in a few Tanchaz attempts, but that was the first time I think it was official that there was a band that's going to play every night in a hall, and a lot of dancers still didn't know how to dance improvised, right? They do their choreographies, you know, and be unhappy that you can't play their exact choreography music in the Tanchaz. So I tried to lead a few teaching circles. I'm sure others did as well. Mm-hmm. But that was a good memory. I remember that being a good year to change things a bit. Levai Peter was there as well.
Right. We did the Kotansky wedding on the stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember the first time you and I met.
That was it?
That was it, but the details. Do you remember the details at all? I guess not.
I don't, no.
I had flown in late to Calgary because of work, and you guys, of course, coming from the east, probably came in late just due to connections and that. And I'm in the airport wondering who's going to pick me up, and I've got my the hard-top boots in my hand because that's the carry-on luggage, and you recognize that as obviously a Hungarian dancer then. So you guys came up to me and introduced yourselves, and we were waiting for Peter to pick us up. He came in the car, and I had a 2-liter bottle of Palinka in the boot that you recognized right away, you know, and the Coke bottle with pure liquid. And that was back in the good old days where you could take liquids on the flights, right? So in the corner of the airport, we were having some shots of Palinka while we were waiting for Levai Peter.
Well, that's Lajos, Lecso, Miklos about the early days, and you start to see some dots being connected with the inclusion of Peter Levai in that story. Let's hear some beautiful music here from Kalotaszeg. This is from the epic recording of the wedding at Mera. This is the wedding. This is when many violinists and contra players, bass players, accordionists, they all came together for the wedding of Tekla and Vucic, and many years ago now. And most of these musicians have passed away, if not almost all of them, I think. And now their kids are playing. What I like about this whole recording is, you know, you can tell they're sitting around at a break or at a party. I mean, you know, these were like the days of 3-day weddings, you know. This is probably back in the 80s. And they were still doing these long weddings that lasted for days. And it's very raw and very real and very emotional and beautiful. And now we'll hear some singing too. The other violinist just starts playing contra. I love it. In my interview with Colleen Bertsch, who holds a PhD in ethnomusicology with a focus on Transylvanian music, and is also the lead violinist of Saska Band in Minnesota, we heard her story of how an unfortunate experience at Tanchaz Talk led her to meet Lengyel Laci, that's today Laci to most of us, and also the Csürös band of Kalotaszeg, which kind of are the descendants of the musicians we just heard play. And then she coincidentally reconnected with them 2 years later while she was conducting field recordings for her research. So here's Colleen Bertsch's rather harrowing tale of what happened to her once at a Tanchaz Talk in Budapest.
Before I had ever made it to Transylvania, I had been taking trips to Budapest to try to find Tanchaz experiences, going to Fono and this kind of thing. And I finally made it to the Tanchaz Talk. This is probably like 2006 or something like that. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any Hungarians. I didn't know, I was completely alone on my own. Mm-hmm. So going to this huge sports arena for this huge festival in the middle of Budapest, or out in the outskirts of Budapest, and not knowing anybody, just spending time going around and checking things out. And it gets a little bit late, and I'm thinking, okay, the last train is at 11, and I knew this, so I go out there at 10:45, something, to catch the train back home to the center. And they had, I walked onto the platform and they announced that trains had stopped for the evening. So I was like, oh, okay, great. So I'm going to try to figure out the buses. So I go out and I figure out a bus, and I get on the bus, and it goes one stop, and the driver gets up and says, that's it, this is the last stop, everybody has to get off. Oh. So I'm stuck out a block away from this the sports arena, and I have really no idea where I'm at, and it's dark. And I start walking back towards the sports arena, and a homeless guy, who wasn't completely all there, started following me and started heckling me, and I sincerely got very scared. I was out in the middle of huge parking lot, and no lights around and nothing around, so I got very scared, and I walked really quickly back to the sports arena, and I saw this really familiar scene in the parking lot. It was a band van, right? A big white van, and these guys were loading music gear into the back, and I was like, okay, I understand that situation, I'm heading over there, right? Mm-hmm. So I run over there, and I'm really shooken up, and the driver's asking what's going on, and then the musicians, they pop out and they surround the homeless guy and kind of chide him, kind of lightening up the situation and getting him away from me, and I'm crying my head off. I'm so scared. And this guy is saying, okay, I'm going to help you figure out a bus. I'm going to help you figure this out. And then finally he just says, just get in the van. I'm going to drive you home. Wow. So this van driver was very sweet and took me home. It turns out to be Laci. I didn't know him, and the band was the Csürös band, and so
wow,
it was very strange for 2 years later to have this trip figured out, and who's Danish helped us set this up, and we get to this house in the middle of Ture and walk in, and here's the guy who saved me in Budapest.
Oh, wow.
And it's his mom's house, and the musicians that were also there who also helped with the situation.
That's quite a story. Small world connections in our Hungarian folklore circle. I also spoke with Levente Fazakas, who, of course, is widely regarded as Transylvania's top Tanchaz violinist, I would say. And he's also the musical director of the professional Háromszék dance ensemble and the very, very popular Heveder band. he gave some great advice about performing and learning and teaching, but I really wanted to select out this clip here where he talks about the joy he finds in music, even in more challenging times. Here's Levente Fazakas.
Yeah, I can't do things just for being professional.
Right,
so
you can't fake it.
It has to be coming from joy.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know, the perception of making it joy, there are some things you have to do, and if you have to do, it's better to do it with joy than without joy. Right. You know.
Yeah.
And I learned from Netti Sanyi, for example, this kind of he loved to play music, and he loved to play music for people. He loved and the people appreciate when they're seeing or hearing a musician who is playing with joy, with a fun and with happiness.
Yes.
You know? And this kind of entertainment, to call like that, you can't do it without honesty.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be honest with that. If you're making for money, that's not working.
Mm-hmm.
The people are seeing that. If you are honestly enjoying your music or not.
Right.
I think if even when I have no
mood. You're not in a mood.
I don't want to play. Even in that position, when I start to play, the whole thing is changed. The whole world is getting clear and bright, and the sun is shining, and I can't play music without enjoying it.
Words of wisdom from Levente Fazakas, and also kind of referencing the great Netti Sanyi as well, Podor Sándor Netti from Kalotaszeg. Let's hear some awesome music from Százcsavás. The music of Százcsavás, Transylvania village. Last year I interviewed Zsigmond Zsigi Vucic, born in Switzerland, but he now lives in the Gimes Valley of Transylvania. Zsigi is a passionate collector, presenter, and producer of Hungarian folk music, as well as a successful project manager in the international business world. And he has focused a lot of his work in the folklore around the music of Százcsavás, which we're listening to right now. In this next clip I'll play for you, he talks about how he first met the musicians of Százcsavás and why their music is his very, very favorite. Here is Zsigmond Zsigi Vucic.
Yeah, this was an interesting story because we were in the Jászberény Django, or not Jászberény dance camp in Jászberény, and so this was a great camp with a lot of experiences And one night the Saschavas band was on the program, and I had my double bass there, and I think Matti came to me to ask to lend the double bass. Mm-hmm. And I asked my friends, so should I give this to this guy? So I don't know. And okay, we give the instrument, and when they started to play, it was like, what the hell? So they performed a show which I never saw before. Yeah, so but just playing great folk music, not something or something circus something, but they just played, and it was so real, and it was so authentic that I and my friend said, "Wow, what is this? What is this? Who are these people?" Yeah, I have still the cassette which I make a recording with my Sony Walkman, and it sounds horrible, but we listened this after that the whole year in Switzerland. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And we decided, okay, we have to go there. We have to see. We have to meet these musicians. And '96 we actually went there with Puma, and since then I was connected to this village, because you go in this village, and I think on each corner you had a musician, because what we saw, there were 5 people, and they changed the instruments between them. Yeah, so the double bass player played at the end violin, and the other played viola, and what the hell. And when you go in this village, there were not just 4 musicians, there were still living 6, 7, 8 musicians there. The old musicians, which were not anymore taken to the camps. And I met. So first I went just to the gypsies. I went to Saschavas. I went up to the hill where they are living. And the first 2 years I just sit there and listen to them and make some recordings. And then after we recognized that there are also Hungarians in this village, yeah. And after we saw this, that how they are connected, the Hungarians with the gypsies, how how the gypsies served the Saschavas Hungarians, then we understood from where is coming this knowledge, this musician, serving this music, yeah, because this Saschavas Hungarian, so these Hungarians in Saschavas are very good singers, yeah, so they are very famous for the 5 voice or canon, I don't know how to say.
5-part harmony.
Yeah. They are very famous for this. They have founded their singing group or choir, how to say, mm-hmm. in 1874, I think, something like this. And that's because they were very good singers. They always looked for very good musicians, and so the gypsies moved there to serve them, because when you were a good musician, you went there and you were asked to go there. Yeah? And so this interconnection between the Hungarians and the gypsies, this is the secret why that Saschavas music is so famous, because there was a group of people, the Hungarians, which asked a very good quality of music, and on the other side there were the gypsies which know how to serve this.
That is fascinating. That never clicked in my mind that it was a pure kind of having studied economics, a pure supply demand equation. They demanded high music because they were very skilled musically, the Hungarian villagers, and the gypsies figured out how to exactly deliver on that demand. Interesting. Wow.
So also the musicians were open-minded. Yeah, so when we went there, they teached us. They were also interested in us, and they never give us the feeling, okay, you are just a guy from Switzerland which can play 2 tones on this bass. Yeah, because I was never a very good musician. Yeah, I just played because there was a need for a double bass player in Switzerland. Yeah?
Right.
And they just really took us and they teach us, they took in their families, and that's why also we decided to invite them to Switzerland, this these New Year's parties, because we wanted to show to this dance house movement what for musicians they are still living.
That was Zsigi, Zsigmond Vucic. Now, we've nerded out quite a bit here with Soma Salamon through some episodes I've called master classes, where we go really deep and technical into various aspects of Hungarian folk music with Soma, who is, I call him our resident in-house expert ethnomusicologist. Soma Salamon, of course, holds a Doctor of Liberal Arts degree with a focus on ethnomusicology. He's a lecturer at the Liszt Academy of Music in Budapest, and he's one of Hungary's most in-demand folk musicians and teachers. Now, his doctoral work had an emphasis on the work of Béla Bartók, who we've spoken a lot about on this program. In this clip, Soma shared with us what Béla Bartók's personal view was on what the ideal skill set of an ethnomusicologist is. So here's Professor Soma Salamon. Just one clip. I could select many others with Soma over the course of the interviews I've done with him, but here's Soma on Bartók and the ideal ethnomusicologist as described by Béla Bartók.
The ideal ethnomusicologist must be a true, a real historical polymath.
Yes.
Because the ideal ethnomusicologist must possess a linguistic and phonetical lore in order to notice the slightest signs and notice to transcribe the slightest signs of the local accent, for example. But the ethnomusicologist must be also a choreographer. To precisely describe the relations between folk music and folk dance. The ethnomusicologist also needs deep lore and education on folklore, because only with this education it's possible to describe the folk music, the relations between folk music and folk customs, for example, until the finest details.
Yep.
The ethnomusicologist must be a sociologist as well, to control or to not to control to find all the social changes and social impacts which disturbed the collective life of a traditional community. And then, when the ethnomusicologist would like to draw final deductions, then he needs historical, he or she needs historical and first of all local history of the local settlement, so historical informations. If the ethnomusicologist would like to compare folk music of other ethnicities with his or her own, then the ethnomusicologist must possess the knowledge of foreign languages. And then, above all, it's very important to be a good musician with good instinct and good hearing and good ear. Bartók concludes that kind of collector like this, who synthesizes as many skills as I just listed, simply cannot exist. So perhaps a completely satisfactory ethnomusicology work can be done by one person.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a huge thing. Yeah.
And Bartók always, and in another writing, he demands a very objective view. That he writes that you have to suspend your national impressions, national feelings, while you are working with interethnic research.
Yeah.
Because objectivity is above all. So for him, it was completely, and I think it's a very, very, very bright example for all the ethnomusicologists, not only in Carpathian Basin, which is, for a long time is tormented by interethnic conflicts, but to every ethnomusicologist all around the world.
Agreed. Salamon Shomo, as usual, with very deep wisdom. Marczyk is the violin-playing frontman of the world-famous Lemon Bucket Orchestra, one of the key creative figures in Toronto's performing arts scene, and a pivotal builder and connector of folk music communities. He was able to squeeze some of his valuable time in for me when I interviewed him back in September 2020 at the height of the pandemic, or one of the heights of the pandemic. I found particularly compelling in our interview his recounting of his profound experiences at Tanchaz's, which he first saw at the Chipka camp in Michigan several years ago, and how they compare to his native Ukrainian folk culture. So here's Marczyk from Toronto about what Tanchaz means to him.
I was so moved when I came down to Chipka and had my first, Tanchaz experience. And it wasn't only about the music. I could talk about, meeting Levente and how the technical parts of how he, to ask me to hold the violin that changed the way that I played forever, or about playing songs with you from recordings that you sent to me weeks ago that I was just dying to learn, just doing it in a drunken midnight session, or the musical parts. But the thing that really struck me the most of that camp and that Tanchaz was that it was such a fully inclusive intergenerational thing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a scene, if you think about the indie music scene or the EDM scene, where there's a certain way that you look, there's a certain way that you talk, there's a certain attitude that you have to be accepted within that community. What I felt there was everyone from the 4-year-old kid to the 90-year-old grandparents were participating in this incredible experience, whether it was music or dance or sport or playing soccer or doing wet and wild, fun, just getting through the heat in the summer. It was just this full kind of intergenerational thing and I, as somebody who wasn't Hungarian, to come into there and to just feel completely at home was so inspiring and liberating.
So you kind of missed that from the Ukrainian community. Had you kind of stuck with it, I'm sure you might have experienced that. But I am going to say, of course, that as a proud Hungarian, that we have this Tanchaz movement, which makes what we do very unique. Is there a Ukrainian version of Tanchaz, or put another way, how do you guys party to your folk music?
Listen, it's you know what? It's not the same, and I say this obviously with all respect to myself and my own culture, but one of my big takeaways from experiencing, the Tanchaz, let's say, movement or the Tanchaz culture, was that I remember clearly being I wish we had this in the Ukrainian community, because there is a community in every sort of, if we're focusing on Eastern European communities, every country has their own community. They each have their folk music, and they each have different ways of celebrating that, or partying to it, or whatever. But the thing is that with Ukrainian folk music, there's an element there that is not tied to the music at all that hinders hugely, and that was Soviet presence, right? So there was, literally execution of folk musicians throughout the history that stopped that kind of proliferation, and that continued on into well beyond the fall of fall of communism. It didn't happen on that sort of level where it's like, you play, you die, but there was this kind of like a Russification and a popification of the culture that didn't allow for the folk traditions to grow in the same way that they did in the Hungarian community, in the same way that I see there isn't like a phono house in Ukraine that is so extensive in documenting all the various regions, but then not only that, but in creating a space for it to live and be passed on to generations. There are definitely small groups that are interested in it. We have our folk dances, some of them, some of the music, but they're not things that that most people know or are interested by, and they're not sort of staples of our cultural gatherings, whether they're here or there. They're more of a, how would I put it, they're more of like a kind of extra thing. There's a little sense of pride when it happens, but it's not like a necessity for Ukrainian party.
Right.
It's too bad, really, and it's something that, both with Lemon Bucket and now with my wife, with Marczyk, and in various ways, we've been working really hard to kind of bring into our communities.
It's always nice to hear kind of an outsider, so to speak, view on how we're doing things within the Hungarian community. It kind of makes us feel very good. Mark Marczyk there in my discussion with him from a couple of years ago. Well, we cannot celebrate Tanchaz without hearing some music from Szék, so here it goes. Again, this is Gyonta at the Western Canadian Hungarian Folk Festival. This is a really good recording, considering it's a bootleg from a live performance, isn't it? This was in Lethbridge, a very nice theater there. I think might have been in Regina. That's the great thing about bootlegs; you don't know where they come from. More recently, I interviewed Zina Bozzay, who bridges together Hungarian villages and people around the world as she researches, teaches, performs, and arranges traditional Hungarian folk songs. Educated at the prestigious Oberlin Conservatory of Music and now living in Budapest, Zina spearheads multiple international projects, including offering classes and presentations with thousands of participants every year from dozens of countries on no less than 6 continents. In this clip, Zina and I spoke about how folk singing used to be integrated into everyday life, particularly everyday village life, and the therapeutic effect it might have in our own lives today if we started doing it, that is folk singing, more regularly again. Here's Zina Bozzay on the power of folk songs.
Yeah, I think having an awareness, and this is something that I really try to mention in my classes a lot, so that we're not just sort of learning the songs in isolation and not having any idea of the context that they're coming from, And the first thing, of course, to say is that there was singing literally from morning to night in traditional village life. And in terms of the function, people were singing to process their grief, or to sing their joys, or to sing while they worked, or to sing to flirt, or to court, or to communicate, to tell stories, or to sing for partying. You know, Hungarian would say mulatság, right? To dance and have catharsis and party, and to sing with friends. And there was singing during the harvest time. There was singing during I mentioned the evening spinning or weaving, the fono or guzsajás, evening handwork time, especially in this season in the winter, or at least this season in the northern hemisphere, right? The cold months of the year.
Yeah.
The people would gather together, you know, in the evening, not just for a couple hours, but for many hours to do their handwork together. And that's true all through the calendar of the year, as there were all these different tasks to do, that it was always accompanied by song, which of course kept people from being bored and also gave them a chance to communicate and tell stories, or like I said, to be playful or to process their grief. And of course we also have separate plaintive songs, kasárgás, to specifically sing on your own, you know, to process your grief, or lullabies that sing to your kids, or songs you sing in community while dancing, you know, not just during the work, but also during the tanchaz, the regional tanchaz in the village, or the finally or ostoli songs that are sung around the table after all those many hours of dancing in the wee hours. So, you know, if we look at just how many settings in which people were singing, any given villager might have known dozens or hundreds of songs. It's a huge repertoire of melodies and texts that were right at their disposal. And that's an emotional toolbox that you can use when you need it, you know, for communication, for processing, for joy, for expressing your values, your way of seeing the world, the knowledge that you have about how things work, and also all the imagery that goes with all of that, the sort of, you know, cultural symbolism and metaphors, and the poetry that's passed down in those texts over the many generations. And there's space there too for that individual creativity and improvisation to play with that text a little bit, to add in a new bit here or there and a variation. And so I guess I'm saying all of that to say that there's a real function for it. And if we see that, and we see that we don't necessarily have those tools, that we look at, well, how is it different for us now if we have these emotions and we're processing them without those tools? And maybe we see singing more as something that, you know, one talented, you know, star does on a stage, you know, a famous singer, and everyone else is in the audience. That's a radically different relationship with singing. And that shift from active to passive, or one person can, you know, out of 100 people, one person can sing, the other 99 are audience or consumers, you know, instead of in this traditional life I'm talking about, where most people, or almost all people, were singing actively all through the day. So I encourage people to really reflect on that, on what songs they know and what songs they have in common, you know, with their friends, their relationship with their own voice, and whether they feel that desire to sing. That's something that we talk a lot about. We mentioned Ágocs Gergely and others, and he also talks about it's not just that people aren't singing folk songs anymore, they're just not singing at all. And that's really something to reflect on, you know, how much our lifestyle has changed, and what we might do to shift that back, you know, as these evening activities have changed from weaving together to watching Netflix, you know, by ourselves instead of being like our social with our family or our friends or neighbors. You know, that there are these major lifestyle changes and our energy changes in terms of expressing ourselves through song. I know it's sort of a long answer, but I hope I'm...
Well, you're onto something. I mean, folk singing as a form of therapy is what I'm hearing.
Right.
And
a radical shift from basically an active relationship with expression, and so being active and expressive and social, to being more passive and isolated and a consumer of music. So it's a very different relationship.
Yeah. Is this something that you've kind of discovered on your own, or is this something that you've learned through your mentors? Because this is a pretty powerful notion. I don't think it's come up yet on this program, talking with anybody, how this is almost like a therapeutic thing. But you know,
no, it's absolutely something I've seen through the eyes of my mentors. So I would in no way take credit for this idea. So it's something that they absolutely have emphasized many times, and I can absolutely see it through the work that I've been doing this last 15 years.
Zina's view echoed my discussion with Sylvie Paquette-Fritsch. Sylvie is one of the beating hearts of the Quebec, Ontario Hungarian community, and a singer, musician, dancer, and co-founder of the Yonta Hungarian folk band with a wide spectrum of professional experience ranging from farming, as she lives on a farm, to IT. In my interview with Sylvie last year, we spoke about her life on a farm and how it connects her to folk songs on a regular basis, kind of what we just heard from Zina. Here's a part of my discussion with Sylvie. Folk songs are often about the land, agriculture, even horses. Is living on the farm like you do, does that help you connect with the songs? And then put another way, are you ever out there doing your farming work and you say, yeah, I get that song now, whatever, or does it bring you closer to what the life of the people who created these songs hundreds of years ago in these remote villages of Transylvania and Hungary might have been thinking?
Absolutely. And in particular, my time in Australia, because, here where I live, it is farming land, but I wouldn't call it like very remote and really sort of super agricultural. But the places that I lived in Australia were, you're so far from your neighbors and you're, completely remote. Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I would be, riding a horse or dealing with a situation and a song would come into my mind, or yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, we
some of the great revival musicians and singers, live in condos in Budapest, and or in apartment buildings, in the outskirts, but that connection that you have every day with the land, is must be a powerful thing. Because I know when I was in Transylvania and I just saw the shepherd sitting there looking over the flock, and I'm like, I get it. I get the song. I get where it's from, and I think that's, absolutely. Yeah. And that real sort of codependence between, like, not just the land, but, your animals and everything, and how they're really, you're depending on each other so much. It's really interesting. Yeah, interesting. Music? You want more music? All right, I'll give it to you. Here's a clip, another live bootleg. From the village of Erdő, Szombattelke in northern Mezőség. This recording has some dust on it. It's from 1997 in New York City at the Knitting Factory, played by Életfa. Életfa, Hungarian folk band, of course, America's first dedicated Tanchaz band, which we formed back in the 1980s in New Jersey. And playing the violin here was a guest artist at the time who we were touring with, a young chap called Csík János at the time, was with us in 1997 on a tour of the East Coast. The Knitting Factory, a wonderful club downtown New York, just steps from the World Trade Center, actually. Again, this is 1997, but my understanding is after 9/11, the club kind of stopped operating soon after that. So we had some great nights there with Életfa back in the late 90s. Some good times, including this nice concert. Of course, Cheek Janos landed on his feet, didn't he? Good kid there, with his great Cheek band. And they probably still play this selection once in a while. Some great music. While Tanchaz Talk Interviews focuses primarily on Hungarian folk music, I've had guests on where we discuss other nations' music as well. Polish, Croatian, Ukrainian, which you've heard. And in this next clip, Albanian. We talked about Albanian music when I interviewed my good friend Raif Hyseni, originally from Kosovo and now living in New Jersey. Now, he is one of the most well-known Albanian musicians in the world and a highly respected folk music teacher and the accordionist, arranger, and band leader for his wife, the legendary singer Merita Halili. Now, here's a part of my conversation with Raif, in which we talked about how popular Albanian folk music is within the general Albanian population, as opposed to the relative obscurity of Hungarian folk music, even within Hungary, and why that may be due to the use of more modern instrumentation in Albania and the Balkans in general, as opposed to Hungarian folk musicians shying away from that type of contemporary instrumentation and really kind of sticking to their guns using the more traditional instrumentation. This was another great discussion with Raif Hyseni, and here we talked about this different approach.
And it's a distinction really between the Hungarian culture and music and everything to the south of it, and even in Romania. Because you've used these contemporary instruments, we don't have this in Hungary. Like if you try to play Hungarian folk music with that instrumentation, it's just not it's not folk music anymore. They call it like world music or fusion or whatever. But what you guys are playing is still unmistakably folk music, and it's just on more contemporary instruments. You keep the old instruments, but also add to it the more contemporary. But that is why, everybody knows who you guys are around the world, because because it's become mainstream. People are more able to listen to Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or Elvis Presley and then say, and this sounds a lot like it, except this is our music. Whereas if you listen to, the pop music and then you listen to Hungarian folk music, you could tell the difference, right away. Now, that's not, it's just not, it's neither bad nor good. It's just very different, where because Hungarian folk music really is niche and not really well known to the general population, unlike your folk music is. And I think it's due to the instrumentation, right?
Yeah, I think I do agree with you. And actually, the only that in how much I saw and how much I did follow so far, not regular basis, but in general, I didn't see Hungarian music that is the same level as other Balkan music by using contemporary, instruments.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is good or bad. I will say it's good, but because it's a pure music, and still we have those national ensembles who keep that tradition. That those are the only one. But even the most famous village singers in Kosovo and in Albania, like very rural, places. Today, he could be like 8 years old man, great singer, very famous, and he sings with the rhythm machine, with a drum set, electric drum set.
Uh-huh.
No more pure as he used to sing, let's say, with a chifteli or just a frame drum or tapan.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wants to adjust the lifestyle, the music lifestyle, if I can say it like that.
Yeah.
Know what I'm saying? So, in other hand, it's kind of risky
because everybody becomes the same. The only difference is just the language. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And the harmony, they start trying to. They have almost the same chord progression, same harmony, and that doesn't make different from another country to the other. Which that's the beauty, because Hungarian music is so beautiful because it's different.
Well, that was Raif Hyseni talking about, at least in his view, how special and unique Hungarian music is. And that conversation sets us up nicely for this last best of clip from my interview with Péter Arendas. Péter, a doctor of liberal arts, a professor in the folk strings program at Budapest's Liszt Academy of Music, one of Hungary's most in-demand kontra players, and has been a bedrock for Tanchaz-related programming for decades, including as the musical director of the annual Tanchaz Találkozó. Towards the end of the interview, I asked him to reflect on the current state of Tanchaz music and the movement in general, and how he sees things projecting decades ahead. It was definitely an uplifting message he conveyed, especially as we reflect on today and the 50th anniversary that we're celebrating of the Tanchaz movement. So here it is, Professor Péter Arendas on the future of Hungarian folk music.
Well, I'm so happy because if I'm looking around, I see lots of young musicians. And hundreds of young musicians or thousands of young musicians who start playing Hungarian folk music. I think it's absolutely normal that if there are so many people, they don't think in the same way. So someone prefers the authentic traditional music, someone prefers the world music, someone prefers the city village music, not village, gypsy music, sorry. So the Magyar Nóta.
Yeah.
For example, it's okay. I think about 10 or 15 years ago started a special thing when a young musician started to love the city and the world music, and there were much more folk musicians who were authentic music players before, and they started to play world music. For example, you told me Soma. For example, Buda Folk Band.
Yes.
When they were a child, they learned the traditional authentic music, and then they start to play the world music. What I see now is coming back to the traditions. It means, for example, Szalóki Ági made lots of fantastic CDs together with jazz musicians, and I love those CDs. But now she mostly wants to sing traditional music with traditional musicians. For example, Salamon Soma. He did the Buda Folk Band. Now he says no world music, the traditional authentic music is the best way. And there are much more musicians like this. So now what I see is now it's a trend again to play as authentic as it's possible.
That's amazing.
And I hope, I hope it will continue. So in 20 or 30 or 40 years later, there will be young musicians who wanna learn the authentic style, and it's our felelősség, responsibility. Yes, what we show now, it will happen 20 or 30 years later.
Yes.
Well, there it is, folks. I mean, we've what an uplifting message. We've reached the end of this special Best of Tanchaz Talk Interviews episode as we've celebrated the 50th birthday of the Tanchaz, the focal point of the Hungarian roots revival movement. You know, based on what we heard today, of course, it's not surprising that the Tanchaz movement has been inscribed in the United Nations Register of Good Safeguarding Practices as a model for the transmission of intangible cultural heritage. You know, it's been the centerpiece of Hungarian folk culture, and by the sounds of it, the future of it as well. Make sure again you subscribe to Tanchaz Talk on the show's YouTube channel, as well on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcast stores, and pick your favorite and give the show a like or a review if you dig it, and share it with your friends, please. Until next time, see you at the Tanchaz.